Good day! A recent study found that multiple family members are involved in making everyday choices, from groceries to investments. That same study also identified 6 primary family structures in the Philippines, each with distinct financial patterns and decision-making dynamics. If you want to find out more, grab your cup of coffee and join us on Freshly Brewed, where compelling conversations brew between fascinating guests and Business Mirror journalist hosts. The Boston Consulting Group recently released its findings on the study titled The Filipino Family. In addition to identifying 6 primary family structures, the study found that the top 3 priorities of Filipino families are financial security for health emergencies, building a large savings fund, and improvement of nutrition and food quality. To tell us more about the findings of the Filipino family study, let's listen into the conversation between Lance Katigbak, a principal at Boston Consulting Group, and Business Mirror's labor reporter Justine Syra Garcia.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Freshly Brewed. This is Justine Syra Garcia, labor reporter of Business Mirror. December is always a meaningful time for Filipino families, a season of decisions, reunions, and reflection. Today, we're taking a closer look at a nationwide study that offers a rare data-driven view of how families across the country make choices, manage resources, and shape their hopes for the future. Joining us is one of the co-authors of the Filipino Family Study from the Boston Consulting Group, a report that has sparked important conversations about household priorities and the central role of the family in our economic life. Let us all welcome Mr. Lance Katigbak, Principal at Boston Consulting Group. Sir Lance, good morning and welcome to Freshly Brewed. Kamusta po kayo?
Morning, Justine. Thank you. I feel great and excited to be here.
Well, before we get into the findings of this study, I think it's important for our viewers to first understand the perspective of the organization behind the study. So, can you tell us more about the Boston Consulting Group? What does it do? Ano yung mga type of study na ginagawa nito?
Yeah. BCG is really a global management consulting firm. We have offices in over 90 countries, and BCG is really known for having invented the field of corporate strategy. But I think what's important to know about BCG is our purpose. Our purpose is to unlock the potential of those who advance the world. And so for us, that means working hand in hand with our many clients, whether these are private sector organizations or public sector organizations, to help them answer some of the most difficult questions that they have to face. And the recent study that we did on the Filipino family and many of the other studies we've done in the past are really ways for us to inform the work that we do so that we as consultants can understand what exactly is going on in the market, and also to help contribute back to the national conversation and help provide data and insights from a reputable third-party organization.
So, particularly, what kind of studies does BCG undertake recently? Well, aside from the Filipino family nga.
So we've conducted a series of 3 studies so far, beginning last year. The first study was called The Filipino Dream, where we answered the question, what do Filipinos dream of, and how far or how close do they feel to achieving those dreams? The second report we did was in partnership with DTI, called Heart of Hustle, and there we looked at MSMEs, and we tried to understand why do MSMEs start businesses, and what is needed to understand their growth. And the third report is this one on the Filipino family, where we try to understand what the priorities of the family are and what matters to them. I think the common theme in all our reports is we try to understand different actors, different stakeholders in the Philippines, and we try to understand what their aspirations are, what their dreams are, and what it is that we can do as a nation to help empower, help unlock their own potential.
So let's go back to the Filipino Dream, since this was the first study that BCG conducted. Many people for sure are curious about how, the Filipino Dream evolved to the Filipino Family Study. So for those who are unfamiliar lang, can you walk us through the Filipino Dream and how it relates to the Filipino Family Study?
The Filipino Dream was a survey of 1,500 individuals. We asked each of them, what is your dream for the next 10 years? And we landed on 2. The first one was to achieve financial security to absorb health scares. The second one was to start a business. Right, so the lens that we took in this study is, ano pangarap ng mga tao? What are they aspiring for in the future? The Filipino family is similar, but I think instead of serving 1,500 individuals, we surveyed 1,500 families. So we really tried to understand the perspective of about 6,000 people, because there's about 4 people per family. And instead of asking about dreams, kasi parang wala naman masyadong family dream, we asked about family priorities. And then we gave them a similar list of options, and we asked them, what are your priorities as a family? And we also asked them, how much progress are you making towards these priorities?
Right.
Parang nagtatrabaho ba kayo to make these come true? And there we found that the top 3 priorities of the family were, so the number 1 was the same. It was financial security to absorb health scares. The second one was to have a large savings fund. And the third one was to improve daily nutrition and food quality. Yung priority about starting a business. Lumabas siya as parang a priority na parang may pangarap pero hindi natupag. So parang they're not actually actively working towards it, but they see it as something that they would like. So for now, I think it really remains just a dream.
Right. So is it safe to assume that the focus shifts from the individual Filipino to the family as a whole?
Well, that's what we wanted to unpack in the study is how does the individual perspective differ from the family perspective? Because I think one of the things we also learned in the Filipino dream is that Filipinos don't actually dream for themselves. They dream for others. They dream for their extended family. If you ask somebody, what are you hoping for? That financial security, it's not just for me. It's really for my extended family. And so because of that finding, which I think to many of us Filipinos, it's not super surprising, but it was good to have data.
Right.
Then we said, okay, well, let's try to get a broader picture. Let's try to really get a picture of the family naman as an actor.
But what also prompted BCG to conduct this study specifically for the Filipino family?
One of the interesting things about the Philippines is that only 9% of Filipino households have one person. This is very different from the West. In Italy, in the US, in France, you'll see anywhere from 30, 32, 45% of households having just one person. And if you think about that now, so that means of the 20 to 23 million households, less than about maybe 2 million have just one person. That means the vast majority of people live in households of, more than one person, right? The average household size, I think, is about just over 4 Filipinos. But I think what you actually learn, what you actually understand from that is that there's quite a range. There's people who live just 2 of them, but you also actually see many families with 6, 7, or even 8 members in the family. And so I think that for us was the important angle to unpack. And we wanted to understand, well, because of this unique nuance of Philippine society, how are decisions made that are going to be different? Kasi syempre, if you're living alone, you make all the decisions. Pero kung 2 kayo, kung 3 kayo, kung 4 kayo, parang nag-iiba na yung decision-making dynamics, nag-iiba na yung parang kanino magpapaalam, kanino But I think all these things just tend to differ because you have more people na in the family.
And Filipinos are really family-oriented talaga, no? Well, nabanggit mo nga compared to the West na mas common doon yung isa lang sila or kaya double income with no kids na couples, right? Anyway, so I think a lot of our viewers are now curious, paano nyo naman ginawa tong study na to? You've already mentioned you interviewed 1,500 households, but aside from that, what methods did you use and how long did the research process took?
The whole process took about 3 or 4 months, and it had 2 parts. There was a quantitative aspect, so we partnered with a quantitative research firm. They sent out reporters onto the field, and we also conducted some surveys online. So both of these methods ensured that we had representation nationally. So it was representative in terms of income, age, urbanicity, so urban versus rural, and even family size. And then on top of that, we also conducted a lot of qualitative research. So we partnered again with another ethnographic research firm. We conducted a lot of interviews to try to understand the psyche of the different families. And then we also produced a series of videos, 1 per family type, that we shared on our website, just to give you kind of a sneak peek into the average, if you can call it that, the average family in each of these family structures.
I know this is a nationwide survey, but are all regions represented or meron kayong mas focused regions?
We didn't look necessarily to get representation from every single region, but it's representative in terms of urban and rural, and we also had we also had representation from NCR, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, based on the proportions of the population in each of these regions.
Right. Well, let's talk about the results of the study now. So, one of the most talked about parts of the report is the emergence of 6 family structures, something that, really paints a diverse picture of Filipino households today. So, can you walk us through these family structures and what makes each one unique?
Yeah. So there's 6 family structures. The simplest way to think about them is in terms of the number of people who are earning in the family. You have your family structures with 1 earner, 2 earners, and multiple earners. So in your single earner family, you have your nuclear family, so 2 parents, 2 kids, and there's 1 breadwinner, usually the father. Then you have your solo parent household. This is usually, again, 1 parent with 2 kids, and again, it's usually a mother who's the solo parent. Of course, there are, in both of these cases, there are obviously many times when it's the mother who's the breadwinner or it's the father who's the solo parent, but most of the time from the study, that's what we found. So these single earning families represented about 1/3 of all Filipino households. Then you have your dual earner families, and you either have your nuclear families with both parents working, and then you have your dinks or your double income, no kids. Both of these families represent another 1/3 of the segment. And then you have your last third, which is your multi-earning families, and there's really 2 kinds. You have your sandwich families, where there's 3 generations, so the grandparents, parents, and then the kids. And then you have your extended families. Usually that has a grandparent, a nuclear family, and then like an uncle, an aunt, a cousin who also lives with that family. So that again represents your last third. Now each of these structures is incredibly unique. We could spend all day talking about what makes each one of them unique. But I think what is important to know about this is that the decision-making dynamics vary significantly. So let me give you an example. In a family that is a family with kids, so any kind of nuclear family, as time progresses, the kids start to make more decisions and the parents start to step back, right? You see this in many families. As the kids become teenagers, they're the ones who pick the restaurants, they're the ones who choose what to buy in the grocery, and they start to play a bigger role in the family. In a sandwich family, usually what happens is that it starts off as the grandparents owning the house, and over time they hand over the reins of the household to the second generation, the parents. So there's parang a changing of the guard. In an extended family, what happens, it starts off as the household of the grandparents, so they're the ones who kind of make all the decisions. But over time, what actually happens is all the adults in the household, so the grandparents, the parents, the uncle, they all form this committee of decision makers where all 4 of them or all 5 of them end up making decisions together. And if you think about this now, in one household you have kids making decisions, in one you have the second generation, in one you have like 4 adults. That affects, or that has pretty significant implications, right? In terms of how businesses sell to them, in terms of what kind of policies we create, when you consider that the decision-making dynamics are just so different. So that's just one of many findings in the study.
Among those structures, ano yung pinaka-prominent na lumabas sa study niya? Like, ano yung majority ng households? What type of structures do they belong to?
I think that's the interesting thing. There is no overwhelming majority.
Really?
Again, it's 1/3 of these single earning families, 1/3 of these dual earning families, and 1/3 of these extended families. Right? You can combine them if you want into others, but I think that's kind of the beauty of the Filipino household, is that even if you look at just the nuclear family, the 2 parents, 2 kids, that's less than half of the Philippine population. And that's what when we think of family, we think of that. But again, if you only think of that, you're missing out on the extended families, you're missing out on the dinks, you're missing out especially on the solo parents, right, which are 14% of the population and are probably quite an underappreciated and underrepresented segment.
So we can say that hindi natin talaga pwedeng ikulong yung Filipino household into one frame, kumbaga. Kasi parang traditionally, we see Filipino families as yung nuclear or kaya yung mga nasa extended family. Pero ngayon, meron nang nag-evolve na talaga siya through time, based on your study na rin, no?
Yeah. And I think there's other studies that have shown that extended families have increased, like the number of extended families have increased. Probably because it becomes more expensive to live alone, so people just decide to join households. Sometimes it's more economical, sometimes it's just more fun to live with your cousins or your siblings, right? So many reasons happening, but I think what we can definitely say is that there are changes that are happening, and it's no longer what it was like maybe 20 years ago.
Right. Well, going back sa findings, aside dun sa decision-making na napag-usapan natin kanina, meron pa bang other prominent findings na you would like to share with everyone about the study?
I think the headline statistic or the headline finding is really what families prioritize, and there's really three. The thing that most families prioritize is financial security to absorb health scares. The second one is to have a large savings fund, and the third one is to improve daily nutrition, right? But I think it's really worth unpacking that first point on health. We tried to understand, because in the first study in the Filipino dream, again, health was the number one dream. Now again, health is a priority. So we're trying to understand why. And one of the questions we asked was, what is the largest amount of a hospital bill that you can pay for without borrowing or using HMO? And what we found was that 64% of families said that they could not afford a hospital bill greater than 10,000 pesos.
Wow.
10,000 pesos, right? Like that's not even a cell phone these days.
Right.
Diba? And so many families would be hard pressed to pay for a hospital bill, which in that case is maybe one night at the hospital and some doctor's fees and some tests. Diba? Parang they would already be hard pressed to do that. The second thing we also learned is we asked family, what are you afraid of? What are your fears? What are your worries? The top three fears were illness, job loss, and inflation, right? And so you can see that families are so afraid of any kind of destructive emergency, of destructive situation that could really destabilize the family units that they built. So parang, if you think about so many families, parang they're really living in these very fragile situations. Parang kung may isang member ng pamilya na magkasakit, sino ba magbabayad nun? Hindi naman siya, di ba? Lahat yung buong pamilya mag-aambag para matulungan yung nagkasakit. And I think that's really the common theme that we saw in the survey, is that families are afraid, families are managing risk, so that when an unexpected emergency comes, they feel protected.
I think that also highlights yung lack or inadequacy sa social protections, kasi there's fears like that because people are not sure kung meron ba silang pwedeng takbuhan talaga when times of emergencies, no? So, well, you're talking about yung takot nila na gumastos for the hospital, yung pagkakaroon ng savings, but natanong niyo rin ba kung magkano ba yung fund na meron yung isang family? Like, magkano yung nasi-save nila? I think that would be interesting to know, kasi kung knowing na not more than 10,000 yung kaya nilang afford sa hospital bills. No?
Yeah, we didn't ask, how much do you have in savings, but it's probably under 10,000 pesos for most families, right? If they can't afford the 10,000 peso bill.
Well, speaking of the 10,000 bill na pag lumagpas na alam mo yon, hindi na talaga afford ng families. What do you think does this reveal about health-related vulnerability in households today?
I think what we sometimes underappreciate is that health-related emergencies have both the immediate effect and the kind of compounding effects, right? The immediate effect, syempre magkasakit ka, kailangan bayaran yung hospital bills, and mawalan ka ng trabaho. The compounding effect is, depending on what kind of sickness you have, it might take a while before you're able to get back to work. And if it takes a long time to get back to work, that means that your family has reduced income. It also means if you were you were the parent who were staying home to take care of the kids, then the other family members who are working then have to come home to help take care of the kids. So parang it really affects, it really has these like aftershock effects on other members of the family, because everybody wants to pitch in to make sure that the family is well. So you can even extend that further to think, okay, pag may nagkasakit, pag may mawala ng trabaho, edi ano yung nawawala? Travel plans, bakasyon, parang all these things that I would say make life worth living. Parang these are the things that we end up having to keep putting aside, right? Including not just travel, no, but even saving up for a house, saving up for a car, a motorcycle. Parang all these things end up getting pushed back when there's some kind of health emergency that affects the household.
Balikan ko lang yung sa findings natin about the hospitalization and dun sa funding, does this cut across all structures of the family or merong ibang type of structure na iba yung results for them?
No, I think we saw that it really cut through the different structures. The other way that I would probably look at it is it really is very correlated to household income, diba? Siyempre, the more, the higher the household income, then the higher the ability to pay for hospital bill. And if you are in an extended family or sandwich family where there are more people earning, usually that means is mas malaki din yung ability to pay. So I think one of the reasons we're seeing as to why families are moving into these extended households or these sandwich households is because it ends up being a little bit like an insurance plan as well for them. Na if one person gets sick, you have 2 or 3 other people in the house to help care for you, and they're not too far away. So in some regard, the family has become a little bit of the insurance plan in the event of a health emergency.
With everything that we've learned about Filipino households today, what message would you like to leave with our viewers, especially those who see themselves in these findings? Kasi, of course, I'm sure ang dami dito na, oo nga, no, habang nanonood sila ngayon.
I think the main audience for our survey are really the business leaders and the policymakers of the country. Because we put this out not to... We put out these kind of findings really to spark a conversation, to help people think about how they approach business and how they approach policy. I think there's one message that people can take away now. It's that in the Philippines, we don't operate as individuals. We operate as families. We make decisions as families. We are always in constant conversation with each other as to what we can afford, what we should do, what should be put off. And I think the important thing is to make sure that our businesses, our products, our services, and even our policies cater to that family way of living, because it's uniquely Filipino. We can't just take ideas, we can't just take policies that exist in different contexts, like maybe the U.S. or in other Western countries. We have to do things that are really localized and really nuanced to the Filipino context. And for us, that means they're really centered around the family.
Right. Do you have particular suggestions for the businesses on how they can improve their services now that your study about the Filipino family is out?
There's honestly so many, but if I can ask a few provocative questions. We learned from the study, for example, that groceries are mostly a multi-person decision, right? So anytime you go to the grocery, it's multiple people deciding, right? And if you even think about making trips to the grocery, sometimes you make a big trip as a family, sometimes it's just one person buying. But why is it that all our loyalty cards are really just designed for one person? Right. Why not create a loyalty card for the family? Second thing, we know that when it comes to managing money, how do we talk about money? We use words like ambag, toka, pasalo. But why is it that when you think about our banking apps, our fintech apps, wala namang ganung feature, wala namang ambag button, wala namang toka button, wala namang abono feature, di ba? So how could we design our banking apps, our fintech apps to be better aligned to how Filipinos actually talk about money instead of what exists maybe in other countries?
Right.
Or maybe if you think about what's another example? Or maybe if you think about OFWs. OFWs, I think, are obviously a part of every Filipino family. But I think whenever we think about OFWs, what do we think about? We think about remittances. Parang yun lang yung ginagawa nila, is nagpapadala ng pera sa Pilipinas. But I think OFWs do so much more. OFWs want to be very involved in the day-to-day decision-making of the family. So why don't we allow for products or services that allow OFWs to feel more part of the family, or even more in control over their money that they're sending all the way here? Because it's not like they're like a distant relative. No, these are parents of families who move abroad, and they want to remain so connected to their family. So how do you make them feel more part of the family? I think there are any business who deals with OFWs, I think, should have a better answer than just sending remittances to the Philippines.
I think that's interesting kasi nga nabanggit mo na parang most of the services here in the Philippines, may sinusunod na siyang framework eh. But I think this study of yours really highlights kung paano ba may improve yung services na nakuha ng mga Pilipino. But just for opinion lang naman, how many businesses in the Philippines do you think, or like, percentage, do you think cater doon sa talagang nuances ng Filipino families?
Yeah, I don't think I could give you a number, but probably not enough, right? I think look around. I think there are obviously many businesses that do things for families, of course. Like malls are very much family-centered. When you eat out in restaurants, it's usually very family-centered. Like you can order, the portion sizes are really for families, not for individuals. So I think there's so much that we're already doing that exists for families. But I think to go the extra mile, or to really think about how do I make this product really fit within the unique ways that the families operate, I think there's still so much more that we could be doing there.
Wala pa tayo doon,
Wala pa
kumbaga.
tayo.
Right. So, with this new study of yours, of course, I'm sure madaming interested na what's next for BCG. Meron ba kayong upcoming studies pa after this?
We're trying to do a couple more of these every single year. The next one that we're really looking at is trying to understand the Filipinos abroad. So the Filipino diaspora. We're trying to understand how they relate to the Philippines here, or how they relate to Filipinos here. We're trying to understand what the dynamics are beyond remittances. Right? So I think that's something that we're starting to work on and hope to be able to share next year.
We're looking forward to that kasi OFW isa talaga yan sa, backbone ng economy of the Philippines until now.
Yes, for sure.
Anyway, that concludes today's episode of Freshly Brewed. Sir Lance, thank you for breaking down the findings of this study and helping us understand the evolving realities of Filipino households. Insights like these are crucial not only for businesses and policymakers, but for every Filipino trying to navigate economic pressures and daily decisions. To our viewers, thank you for joining us today, and we hope today's discussion offered clarity, context, and a deeper appreciation of how families drive both our economy and our future. If you found this interview useful, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can stay updated on our upcoming episodes. Once again, this is Justine Sayer Garcia, labor reporter of Business Mirror. See you again soon here on Freshly Brewed.
And that wraps up today's episode of, you guessed it, Freshly Brewed. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope the Filipino Family Study will open your eyes to its dynamics. Stay informed, stay inspired, and make smarter choices every day with Business Mirror. For the latest stories and updates, visit businessmirror.com.ph for a broader look at today's business, and follow us on our social media channels. Stay ahead, no more, and we'll see you next time.